Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this RTS Futures session. I'm Jasmine Dotiwala. I'm a multimedia broadcaster, producer, director, and inclusion leader. And I'm honoured and so excited to be chairing this conversation and speaking to our 5 incredible panelists today. If you've joined us here for this RTS session, it's called New Voices and Stories in Documentaries. And you probably answered yes to our question, do you want to be a documentary maker? So welcome to all of you. I know that this hour will be enlightening. If you hear any comments that really resonate with you, feel free to share them on social media, on Twitter, and tag the Twitter handle for the RTS Futures team. And if you would like to add any questions to the Q&A box, you'll see that on the bottom of your screen, just right of centre. So we'll try to get through all of the questions. I hope that I'll be asking all the questions that you're intrigued about anyway, but if you get to near the end and we haven't answered them, then feel free to use the Q&A box. So, as we know, across the media, access to unique stories and hearing new fresh voices are always in demand, and nowhere more so than on television. And this year, TV commissioners and viewers are more attracted to stories from real people across the UK in their authentic voices than ever before. And so in this hour, you're going to hear from programme makers who have brought award-winning, insightful, provocative content to diverse British TV audiences this past year. You'll hear how they persuaded new voices to reveal and share and preserve their unique, very personal stories with the world. And we'll step into the shoes of the commissioners and the producers who give us access to other people's most, I guess you could call it, life-changing moments. And we'll also hear about how they source the subjects and their stories and how they make those first approaches and gain the trust and access. And of course, we'll understand why it was important to tell a story, what went right, what went wrong, and how you can get started making documentaries. We're going to be hearing today from the teams behind the RTS award-winning documentary, The Evolution of Black British Music, which is on BT UK. It's a brilliant 5-part series which showcases all the biggest, most relevant names from 5 different Black music genres. And there are incredible interviews, there's retrospective insight, and such incredible archive footage. It's on My 5, so if you haven't watched it, you must go ahead and watch. I watched again this weekend, and as a big music fan, it was just really exciting going back, rewinding and hearing the stories. And we're also going to be hearing from the team behind Channel 4's youth news strand, which is titled Untold. And that's produced some really dynamic episodes. You've got lots from all across intense youth culture tribes, from incels to YouTubers and reality show stars. And the episodes are so gripping, especially the incels and boy racers. They're really just edge of your seat insight. So seriously, check them out too if you haven't already on channel4.com. So the structure of our conversation today will be the art of the documentary, how your documentary needs to fit the broadcaster's brand and brand values, the relationship between the commissioner and the producer, documentary 101 skills, and then the final tips to get into the industry. So let's meet our panelists. Cicelia Deane is an editorial and commissioning executive for BT UK, which is a subsidiary of Paramount. She's been at BT UK since 2021 and is responsible for developing, sourcing and leading all aspects of original content for the channel in the UK, spanning documentaries, factual entertainment and reality. Cicelia joined BT UK as an RTS and BAFTA nominated series producer, series editor and production consultant with 20 years of experience making factual, entertainment, reality and observational documentary programming for television and online channels. She was series producer on the BBC 3 series The Rap Game UK, Yo MTV Raps. Other notable credits include things like Brand Design, Celebrity Big Brother and Come Dine With Me. Welcome, Cicelia.
Thank you, Jasmine.
We also have Debbie Ramsay, who is a commissioning editor with Channel 4 at News and Current Affairs, and she's the launch editor for the youth strand, which is Untold. I just mentioned it to you. Untold tells stories of 16 to 34-year-olds across the UK in all their glorious diversity in an unflinching, informative way. Previously, Debbie was exec editor in charge of commissioning original stories across BBC News UK and head of journalism youth programmes at Radio 1 and 1 Extra Newsbeat, where she started her BBC career in 2007. And during those 16 years, she also commissioned and presented audio docs for BBC Radio 1 Extra. She also co-presented a news and music show, read bulletins and worked as a reporter. And exclusive to us, because it's just been announced today, she's just been announced as the editor for Channel 5 News. Congratulations, Debbie, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jasmine.
Femi Oyeniran is an award-winning actor and filmmaker who was born in Nigeria and moved to the UK at the age of 10. His acting career has seen him star in adulthood as well as comedy and Anotherhood. He's been in Absolutely Fabulous, Demons Never Die, lots of other titles. He himself wrote and directed and produced feature films like It's a Lot, The Intent, the prequel, The Intent 2, The Come Up. And Femi has co-founded and leads his own production company called Fan Studios with grime music legend and filmmaker Nicky Slimting Walker, who is also our panelist today. And their BET UK show, The Evolution of Black British Music, which I mentioned, picked up an RTS programme award in the arts categories. And they've also created a show for Channel 4's Untold Strand, which Debbie oversees, called Rap to Riches. So we're all connected in some way. And then Nicky Slimting Walker is an award-winning filmmaker, actor, and an entrepreneur who's written, co-directed and co-produced a sequel of feature films, The Intent and The Intent 2. Prior to setting up their production company, Fan Studios, with business partner Femi, and delving into the world of film and TV, Nicky was one of the pioneers of the grime music scene, making a name for himself as a DJ, music producer, and a promoter. And as well as their work in film and telly, Nicky and Femi are also sought after by artists, like music artists, to direct their music videos. So multifaceted. And finally, Charlie Mole's a self-shooting director, producing documentaries and numerous investigations for BBC Panorama, BBC Three, Channel 4's Dispatches, Untold and Unreported World. He's directed and filmed programmes on a range of topics, from the secret world of incels. He's done a documentary about boy racers, which is on this season of Untold for Channel 4. He's also done shows like Inside Britain's Kidnap Gangs for BBC Three, as well as an 8-month-long undercover investigation for BBC Panorama exposing poor practice within the UK's biggest NHS GP chain. Welcome to our panel. Thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So let's kickstart off by asking you to just briefly talk through your journey so far, because our audience are always really interested in the pathways to how you got into your telly job. So just a quick who, how, where and why you got into TV. And could we go in this order? Cicelia, Debbie, Femi, Nicky and Charlie. Thank you, Cicelia.
No worries, thank you. So my career path has been sort of quite traditional, I suppose. I studied a media-related degree. I went to the London College of Fashion. I wanted to be a fashion journalist, but that course did enable me to touch on PR and broadcast as well. And I ended up just loving the idea of working in telly instead of writing for magazines. So I basically wrote to loads of different companies, did unpaid work experience at LWT, it was then, which is a subsidiary of ITV, or it was. And when I graduated, I was offered a job there, and I stayed at that company for 8 years or something. And then after that 8 years, I went freelance and worked my way up as, you know, from researcher to AP to shooting producer, director to series producer. And as you explained in your intro, I went from series producer, freelance, to being here at Paramount BET as a commissioner.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I started my career in local newspapers in the northwest of England, but I always wanted to get into radio. So at the weekends, I was working for local radio stations in Manchester and Wigan and Preston on the sly. And then I went finally full-time into radio. And then from radio, in the northwest in Preston, I became news editor there, and then I was headhunted by the controller of a station called BR&B in Birmingham, who heard me reading the news. So I then worked in Birmingham for 2 years, and then from BR&B I went to Capital in London, where I was for 3 years, and then I went to One Extra. I started off mainly on One Extra News, and then sort of most of my time at the BBC was spent at Newsbeat and One Extra, where I commissioned audio documentaries, which I loved, sort of gave me that flavour of documentary making and telling stories in long form. And then I guess I got into TV by sort of not getting into TV, it was more getting into video making. So when I was editor of Radio 1 Newsbeat, we used to make iPlayer films. Specifically iPlayer films. Sometimes they used to go on TV as well, but I've always kind of approached it from I'm just making a visual film rather than TV. And then from there, went to Channel 4 about a year ago and was the launch editor for Untold, as you've mentioned, Jasmine.
Okay. Femi.
I started out as an actor. 17, I was in a film called Kid Altered, which is probably one of the most revered sort of youth culture films of the past like 20, 30 years in the UK. So I was very lucky to be in that movie. I went from there to study law at the London School of Economics. And when I finished uni, I decided to do acting. For a year, it didn't work really because I wasn't really getting that much work. I was getting, I suppose enough work, but at the time I didn't really feel busy because I went from being at university and doing acting bits here and there and really being super busy all the time to like, you know, getting phone calls every so often from my agent. So then I decided to go into filmmaking as well. So then I started making little short films and online content while still acting. And then I met Nicky, started making films together, and eventually decided to set up a company together. And here we are.
Thanks, Femi. Nicky?
Hey, my journey in filmmaking started around 2010 when I met Femi for a mutual friend in a music studio. My background is a DJ, a promoter, a music producer. I came up in the grime era of like making music and being on pirate radio stations with Dizzy Rascal, Wiley, Lethal Bizzle. And then a mutual friend introduced me to Femi because I was a massive fan of Kidulthood. I was like, I want to make films, I want to make documentaries, I've got loads of ideas. And he's like, okay, I'll put you in touch with Femi. Femi came down to a studio I was working in and I started pitching him tens of ideas and he liked one of them. And then we met up a couple of months later. And then we decided from there that we was going to write scripts together and we're going to start this journey. And he introduced me into the film world. It was kind of similar to the music world. So yeah, I started my journey from there and we're here today. We made a few feature films and our first ever documentary was The Evolution, which Cicelia commissioned.
Thanks, Nicky. And Charlie?
Hello, everyone. I studied history at university and then became a local newspaper journalist and sort of started off at the newspaper basically just after the economic crash in 2010 or 2008. It kind of hit by then, and the newsroom, basically most people in the newsroom my first day had actually been let go, and I soon realized that I didn't really enjoy news, didn't really want to work in it anymore, but I loved journalism and I loved kind of stories and, you know, speaking to people and having this amazing kind of career. And I realized that I thought long form and was the way I'd like to go rather than news. So I moved into, I got a job as a researcher basically for a production company making Channel 4 dispatches programs. And then I stayed at that company on kind of short-term contracts and sort of made my way in that way. And then I became an AP. I got on the Channel 4 dispatches investigative journalism scheme, which is a brilliant scheme that Channel 4 run for people that kind of want to break into the industry and kind of learn new skills. And then I spent sort of 5 or 6 years as an AP on dispatches before I became a producer director. And then since then, I have learned to shoot, learned to direct, and moved in, I guess, more kind of slightly more sort of documentary direction than pure kind of TV journalism. But I still obviously work and make films for Panorama, Dispatches. So that was my career journey.
So many different pathways in. I always find that when it comes to the genre of documentaries, that's always the case. And speaking of genres, if there's one thing that I find with new people that are coming through to television, it's understanding the very, very different levels and names and definitions of what these genres are. So Debbie, can we kickstart with you just explaining what is a news and current affairs documentary, and why does documentary separate itself from all of the other quick win genres? You know, news and current affairs on telly for Channel 4 or the BBC might be a quick day news thing that's, you know, happened during a day, but your documentaries are much longer processes. And why do documentaries matter more now than ever?
I think they matter because we sometimes live in a world where you're just tearing a story in a few seconds, and it's important that we don't just gloss over things, and we get in depth sometimes, and that's what a documentary allows you to do, go a bit deeper. I think specifically for me in news and current affairs, what distinguishes us from other documentaries and other genres is that news line. We've got to be really clear, you know, when people are pitching, that there is something new to say for the audience, and there is a new story to tell that people will write about outside of, you know, Channel 4, and that people will talk about, and that is revealing something new to the audience. So that's where sometimes I would say, when you're pitching ideas, if you are pitching to Untold, there must be something new to say. It's not just about exploring a topic. And if you get a no from a news and current affairs strand, it might just be that you're pitching to the wrong genre. Because whereas, you know, a factualence or specialist docs might take a documentary exploring an area, we have to have that distinction of it having a news line and having something new to say.
Absolutely. And speaking of distinction, I think when you look at what documentary makers do, documentary makers end up being famous for their style of docs. And Femi, Nicky and Charlie, the type of documentaries you three all make are very different. Femi and Nicky, you create longer, more in-depth interviews with retrospective archive footage. And Charlie, your style's much harder hitting, intense documentaries. But are there some common personality traits of a great documentary maker, regardless of your style? Charlie, what would you say?
I think so. I think for me, the most important kind of personality trait is genuinely just being extremely kind of curious and willing to learn and listen to people that you're filming with. And not, I think as well, just, you know, as well as that, being quite kind of single-minded and focused when you're on a story as well. Kind of particularly the sort of work that I do, you know, as Debbie was saying, quite often it's driven by journalism. So you have to be very focused. You have to kind of know what sort of documentary you're making. You have to kind of be very focused on what you want to achieve. You have to be quite single-minded about it. But also you have to have a huge amount of attention to detail as well. You know, what we do is often very sort of legally tricky. There's lots of kind of compliance issues as well. So I think it's that mix of, you know, yeah, being focused, having attention to detail, but also being personable with people, because you have to work with people as well. You know, when you're filming with people, you have to sort of, no matter what the context is, you know, the contributors are part of your film. They're part of your, you know, your work process. So you need to be able to get the most out of them and interact with them, and yeah, and make them feel comfortable and at ease, as well as, you know, telling their story as well. So I'd say that it's that kind of sort of mix of different skills for me.
Nicky, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, for us, or for me, I think it's about really being authentic in whatever stories you're telling, you know, the people you're speaking to, really going in depth and getting to the core of what they want to get across, you know, because these are human beings, these are people who are sharing their lives or their stories, and they're letting you in their world. And I think it's just respecting their space and they're trusting us as filmmakers to tell their story and bring it to the screen. And that's about relationships. That's about researching properly and getting the right archive and getting the right stories and delivering it, because you're representing, for our show, you're representing a whole culture, and you're telling something that's been going for 30 years or 20 years, and you maybe have only got an hour to tell this story. So everybody's part who you're contributing is very important, and it's about dissecting it and taking out the right parts that are going to be able to push your story forward and represent that whole story within that hour of you documenting it and speaking to so many contributors towards you telling that story, because really it's them telling the story. You're just the visual person bringing it to life onto the screen, but really it's their story and they're trusting you with that. So it's really important that you are delicate with that and you pick the right stories. Thank you.
Femi, anything to add to that?
I suppose like there isn't really much I can add apart from the fact that it's about that, what Nicky was saying, it's about the authenticity and representing people in the right way and ensuring that you take care of people's story. In terms of style, I think I look at documentary and scripted the same way. I think you need a beginning, middle, and end. It's just like still a narrative style. It's just different content goes into the narrative sections. So I don't actually distinguish it, because obviously we come from more of a scripted background, and like, you know, we're on here with the two people we've made documentaries for. And so in essence, for me, it's about the, you know, sort of like taking the approach that we take in scripted and trying to figure out how we create sort of like a narrative strand in documentary storytelling, where like the content of it, rather than actors acting, it's people talking.
Thank you. And Cicelia is one of those two people that they've made documentaries for. Would you agree that those are the personality traits? Would you have anything to add?
No, I think the guys have sort of covered everything really. Good at communicating with everyone, the people that you're filming with and the people that you're making the documentary for as well. I think strong communication skills, listening and talking in terms of soft skills are really important.
Excellent. There you go. You didn't miss anything out. You get a gold star for that. So yeah, moving on, you've worked with a wide range of TV genres. What are your top 3 things on your checklist that you're looking for when you're green lighting a documentary for BET UK? And how do you decide which ideas are finally green lit? Because I imagine you're approached with hundreds of ideas every year.
Yeah, so in terms of what I'm looking for, the space that I'm in, commissioning for BET UK, is quite unique because I'm purely commissioning with Black British audiences at their hearts. So that's number one. Your ideal should appeal to Black British audiences. And I'm looking for stories that haven't been told, and there are so many. Unfortunately, you know, I'm able to commission sort of series and programs that look at, like Femi and Nicky did the last 35 years. The evolution of Black British music, in my opinion, should have been made a long time ago, but it hadn't, and it feels really special to be in a place where I'm able to commission that. Another documentary that I was actually greenlit just before I started, but I oversaw it from the start, was Moments That Shaped Queer Black Britain. The story of that community just should have been told already, and it's really great to be in a space where I'm able to do that. What was the second part of your question, Jasmine?
It was, how do you decide which are green lit in the end? Which are finally green lit?
I mean, for me, it's always quite instinctive. I definitely, my slate is quite broad. I don't have a huge commissioning budget, but when I meet with people, it's quite instinctive. When I met with Nicky and Femi, I just knew that I wanted to commission this show, and the buck doesn't stop with me. I then have to go on and pitch it to my seniors. So it has to be something that I'm very passionate about. I've been at the company for a couple of years now. So, and because I don't have a lot of money to commission with, it will be I'll always, on the brief that I send out, have a list of what I'm not looking for, and that's normally because I've just commissioned something in that area. So we're trying to, you know, diversify the slate.
I have noticed that in recent years, commissioners do send out what they're not looking for. And I never used to see that years ago. So I think that's a really healthy thing. Otherwise, people just end up pitching the same stuff. And Cicelia, just to touch on that, at BT, you've commissioned shows that do have strong fan bases in underrepresented communities like the Black community, youth communities. It's a breath of fresh air for audiences to finally see themselves reflected more on screen, especially when it comes to impact and buzz and excitement within those cultures. What kind of feedback have you had from those audiences and the people involved in making these docs?
It's just been nothing but positive. I think the Black community, we just want to see each other win. And so whenever we've, you know, released a show, everyone's championing each other. It's just really lovely to see. Yeah, I've had no bad feedback at all. And we had a launch party for the evolution of Black British music, and just being able to bring together, you know, 30 decades of artists and celebrate that music, everyone in the same room. It just felt, yeah, just really important and really special.
Really important, thank you. And Debbie, you're the commissioning editor for now for the youth strand Untold at Channel 4. What makes Untold content unique, and what does your day-to-day role look like?
I think what makes us unique is because we're sort of going against the trend of making kind of really, like I spoke about, short videos, and it is longer form content. And typically that age group doesn't, there's an assumption that that age group doesn't watch longer form content, but they do. So that's what Untold is tapping into, that space of those stories that people really identify with, that young people identify with, that are rooted in youth culture, but are also saying something new or revealing something for that audience, not about that audience. That's what I think people make the mistake of sometimes when they're pitching and when they're thinking of Untold. They think it's, you know, about education, or about, which doesn't rate highly at all between a 16 to 34 age group. Stories around education just don't hit that age group unless you're telling the right story in a way that involves them and is key to them and that they're interested in. So I think that's the uniqueness of Untold, and also the fact that, you know, I don't commission stuff and say, oh, you need to make it in this style. My priority is to say there's got to be a newsline, and I want you to be as creative as you can be, but it has to make sense. So with the caveat, so it just allows people to kind of be more expressive in different styles of films, and no one film is the same, even when they've been made by, you know, you can see similar traits between, say, the films that Charlie has made. You can see some of that style, you know, coming through, just in the same ways you can see some of Femi and Nicky's style coming through in From Rap to Riches, which is a good thing. But between the different filmmakers and independent production companies, they have different styles, and I want them to be creative because that's what a younger audience expects as well.
Thank you. And Debbie and Cicelia, look, in a world where we keep hearing that young people from Gen Z are leaving mainstream broadcasters in droves and live mostly on YouTube and TikTok, why are youth-focused docs still very important to mainstream broadcasters?
I think you've got to be in the space where your audience is. So that's why for my strand, it is released on Channel 4 streaming first and YouTube. And we do have versions, cut down versions that go on TikTok and Insta and Twitter as well. And I think you're in a really weird place if you're just thinking that audiences are gonna just come to you. You know, you need to work at that and draw them in, and you need to be on the places they are, and you need to be branding your content right, so there's an awareness of your brand. But if you just kept it to your own traditional platforms like Channel 4, you wouldn't reach as many young audiences. So it's that balance of, we want people to hear these stories, and we want them to know us for these stories, and that involves working on other platforms.
Absolutely. And then Charlie, Femi and Nicky, there'll be so many people in our audience today who are content creators who might live on YouTube. They might be used to making short YouTube videos where they live out with their friends in their communities. They might be interested in transitioning from YouTube to mainstream telly. How's the process and the logistics of making a documentary online for a platform like YouTube very different compared to making documentaries at a mainstream broadcaster like Channel 4 or BET UK?
I'd say it's the legal and paperwork expectations. If you're making content for broadcasters, like, you know, you have to clear all everything featured, you have to clear the archive, the music, everything, right? And whereas if you're making something for YouTube, you could just mostly use whatever you want, really. Well, you shouldn't, but you can, right? And so and audience, no one's gonna trawl through like the billions and billions of like clips or archive that you've used or music that you've used, and to try to find your content unless it's gone massively viral. So I'd say like it's the paperwork, because like what's happened before was that YouTube and online content was massively poorer quality than TV. But with the improvement of like, you know, sort of digital cameras and even iPhones, you can shoot really good content visually without having to like use like, you know, broadcast level cameras. And so in a way, I feel like the visuals are getting there, and so people can make really good quality stuff for YouTube. But the only difference I would say now, and that's gonna continue to exist, is the fact that there's just a lot more paperwork expectations when it comes to delivering to a broadcaster. And also, like, you know, it's a curated space. Television is curated. So like you have to tailor things to commissioner's taste, and then after that, tailor it to the channel's brand, and so on and so forth. So actually you have a lot less control.
That was very thorough. Charlie and Nicky, anything to add to that?
I haven't actually got anything. I've only ever made documentaries for broadcasters, which is then being put onto YouTube. So I've never actually made a documentary for YouTube. So I haven't actually made more to add to that.
No worries. Well, I wanted to touch on the commissioner and producer relationship, because I imagine there's a lot of long-winded months and months involved when you're creating these documentaries, the series. Can I start with Debbie and Charlie and ask, how did you connect? And what was it about Charlie that made you instantly know that you wanted to greenlight his idea?
So I guess the way it works is that Charlie connected with the independent production company first, Sandland, and then they brought the idea to us for Boy Racers. And for Incels, I believe we went to them and said, you know, we want to do this. Do you think it's possible? And then the independent production company will take on the producer, the director, etc. But I think I always work in quite a direct way, I would say. I don't like to waste time. I'm sure Nicky and Femi would probably agree with that. I just like to just have it all out and just all know, so we all know that we can speak freely, we can bring things up, and we all know that even on the bits that we don't agree, we are working for the good of the content and the good of the audience. And I just feel that sometimes, you know, if you're there and you're not saying what you really think, or if you're not saying you don't, this is a problem I get a lot with some people that I work with. You don't say, oh, actually, I'm not sure how to do that, and then it becomes a massive problem later on. It's just time wasting and exhausting, and you could be putting that time into making the best product that you can. So I would say always kind of have the discussion and talk things out. You know.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people don't realize actually how kind of time pressured it is with documentaries. I mean, you don't have like, you know, an open-ended budget or an open-ended schedule. You have a time that you have to deliver the program. So as Debbie says, you know, everyone has to be on the same page. You can't afford any miscommunication or anything to, you know, go off on different tracks. Like, we have meetings, we have a setup meeting, we have meetings right throughout the access, we have it before the edit. You know, those meetings are so important, just to make sure that the channel, the director, you know, the production company that are making the program are all completely on the same page. And yeah, it's a lot of it is just about communicating and making sure that you know what path you're going down, and that the commissioning editor obviously knows what content you've been able to get, you know, knows what access, what characters that you've managed to get in the film. If you don't have that line of communication, that channel of communication, obviously it gets really difficult. You know, particularly as the schedule ticks on, you roll into the edit and you see your deadline, you know, fast approaching. Yeah. So
I did wonder about that, because I come from the entertainment world where it's easier to stick to a deadline. But I did wonder about documentaries, especially when you're doing boy racers or incels, because timelines and frames might change. People say they'll turn up, then they don't, and suddenly you've lost a major interview. So there's a real sense of jeopardy there. So it's good to hear you say, Charlie, that actually there is a very strict time frame that you are supposed to deliver in.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd say it's the biggest challenge in making these kind of documentaries, is that, you know, it's not like drama, you know, it's not like drama where you can script and it's completely self-contained and you're able to have, you know, a complete I guess sort of like autonomy over your script. It's very different. You're relying on contributors, you're relying on people who are chaotic, who are hard to manage, who are difficult individuals, you know, turning up in time, meeting your schedule, and it makes it incredibly difficult. Most of my sort of, for the duration of a shoot, most of my time is feeling incredibly anxious that something's going to fall down, you know, and we're not gonna make our deadline. And it's just I'd say, like, managing that, it's just a case of work. You know, you've obviously have to work really, really hard, make sure that you've got lots of options, but also kind of what we hinted at the beginning, having those soft skills as well to try and bring people around when they don't want to appear on screen, and trying to be truthful to their stories as well, because people aren't going to want to go on screen if you're not going to represent them properly as well. So that, you know, you have to sort of comply editorially as well. You know, there are things that we obviously have Ofcom, we have, you know, the BBC have editorial policy at Channel 4. You have very strict guidelines of how you're meant to do things as well. So yeah, faithfully representing your character, it also helps bring people around and helps them trust you as well.
Thanks, Charlie. I am so aware that there are questions popping up in the Q&A box and that we'll never get through all of them. So can I say to the panel, if you see any of the questions in there, you can answer live if you're not currently speaking. If you do have the capacity to multitask, then go ahead. Hopefully it won't be too distracting while we stay on track, right? Cicelia, Nicky and Femi, how did you connect, and why was it really important to tell the story around evolution?
We connected. So when I started at Paramount, I'd come from production. So a lot of the first part of the first few weeks and months of the job were just reaching out to production companies if I'd never worked for them before, and meeting new people. And I was introduced to Nicky and Femi via a colleague at Paramount, another commissioner, because they'd made a series called Drunk Black Histories for her. And so we had a Zoom, and Nicky and Femi pitched loads of ideas, and we got on like a house on fire.
What would you say what was it about Nicky and Femi that would you work with them again? What are the personality traits that would make you work with them again? And then Debbie, if you can think of the same for Charlie, because people can often get commissions and it's a one-off and you often don't hear of them again. What are those personality traits when working with them, when things perhaps got sticky, that you knew they maneuvered and pivoted and made it work?
I just found that they were very easy to talk to. I felt like I was talking to friends. I feel like, you know, we had a very open line of communication via email, via WhatsApp. I was never scared to ask them anything. I hope they felt the same way about me. It was just
to manage differences of opinion. How do you
we just
have any?
No, but whenever there was, we'll just talk it through. It wasn't like it wasn't it's kind of, to be honest, we're very fortunate, like, to get to work with someone like Cicelia. I said it before and I'll say it again. I don't even think we would have made the show if it wasn't Cicelia that commissioned the show, because we had the show like ages before. It was just sitting on our laptop, and it was sort of like something that we wanted to do, and we wanted to do it in the right way. Now, the stories, like, for me, it's not, we don't just, when we come up with ideas for documentaries, there's stuff that we're super passionate about, and like stuff that we really want to do. Or even our films, a lot of our films, we really want to do them, because it takes a lot to get these things made. And if you're not passionate about it, I don't even think I can make stuff I don't care about, because otherwise I just won't be motivated to keep going, even when you can't find a home for it, and so on and so forth. And so in a way, like, finding someone like Cicelia was as passionate about the music, and was like, remember, this started out as a 4-part documentary. She then was like, I'll make it 5, which I regret agreeing to till today, because it made it harder. So because she was like, oh, let's make it a 5-part documentary. I was like, yeah, let's do it. And, you know, like, lots of excitement. We're like, yeah, let's do that. Let's do this. And, you know, having someone that has an opinion, a genuine opinion, an experience of the story that you're trying to tell, made it easier for us to, like, sort of connect and get along, because she was as passionate about the music as we were. And at the same time, you know, working with Debbie and her team on, like, Raps to Riches was a similar thing. It was like, actually, we want to make these shows about some of our friends. Like, one of the contributors, Wretch32, I was walking down the road today after dropping my kids to school, and I saw him. Like, these are, like, my actual people that are my friends. And so, like, making a show with my friends for Channel 4, like, with people that are as passionate about telling that story as I am, like, makes it easy for me. It doesn't even feel like a strain or work. So whatever differences we have in between in the process is.
And I think it's important. I think it's important that when the commissioners, they respect us as filmmakers, they give us that freedom. You know, they don't undermine us. A lot of times you can work with people, and just because they have the final say, because they do have the final say, no matter, they really respected us and gave us that freedom to express ourselves. And if they felt something wasn't right, they articulated it in a way that we was able to digest. Because the thing with working with a commissioner is that you have to respect what they're saying, because they've got their experience, and they're giving you that opportunity as well. And whatever they're telling you, they're telling it to you for the good. They're never really telling it to you for it to be a bad situation. They're asking you to change things or to do this because they're in that space and they understand who they have to answer to and what's best for the channel. So I think with working with both of them was really amazing. They were just really open to listening to our voices. When we was really passionate about something, they listened. They wasn't like, they didn't make us have to do anything. They would speak to us about it, and we would put our case forward, they would put their case forward. And we always met in the middle, which helped both parties to understand that we wanted best for the show. And I think that's important. It's like a marriage, isn't it? It's like a marriage. You work with each other. Like, you know, you have bad days, you have good days. It's back and forth.
I'll remember that when I'm next getting notes from my commissioners. It's like a marriage, guys. Come on. Finally, on the producer and commissioner relationship, Debbie, as a commissioner, what are the sticky areas that you always get when you're working with new documentary makers that you wish they'd be more aware of? What are those things that those new documentary makers should be aware of that you constantly have to reteach them?
So I guess it's just, some of those things that aren't negotiable, that's not even a word properly, but you know what I mean, for a broadcaster, and also just making sure that they keep the focus on this is the story we're telling, because all these stories, you can go off on loads of different tangents, and there are so many elements to everything that we do that it's really important you have a film that's focused.
Right, so the commissioner is always keeping their producer on the path that was promised. Don't divert from that path, stay on track.
I mean, I think there's been several times where Charlie, we've had the conversation of, that's really interesting and we could do that. We could go into the, you know, people changing their face faces with hammers, and we could go off down that route, but that's not what incels is about. So it's drawing them back. And I like working with new indies because they always bring something different. So the bit that I don't worry about, or I just sort of acknowledge within myself, is that some of those things that the more established indies might just do off the bat, the technical things that the new indie won't, and I have to allow more time for that, and I have to allow myself more time to actually work on that with them. But I don't expect people to know all the ins and outs.
You're happy to hold their hands a bit through
yeah,
that.
and it's, to me, it's about sort of just building that relationship so they kind of have trust in what you're saying as well, especially, you know, if you're giving some tough feedback.
Absolutely. And Charlie, I bet there was lots of tough feedback on the eps that you've made. Your docs are really edgy with that real sense of occasional danger. So Debbie mentioned that the way you come up with ideas, sometimes you might take them to the indie production company. Sometimes Debbie might go to the indie production company and say, we'd like to do this, whether it's incels or boy racers. How do you initially approach people and then gain that access and their trust? Because some of the things that I was watching on boy racers and incels, I thought, wow, I mean, I don't know if I could persuade someone to trust me with their identity. A lot of the activity was illegal. There was lots of legal, you know, issues there.
Yeah, no, completely. I think, I mean, both with incels and boy racers, I think the big problems, you know, in terms of getting access there, was that they were both kind of subcultures who were inherently wary of any kind of mainstream media, particularly incels, who are in these kind of online forums, and they're very much kind of sealed off from the world. They see the mainstream media, they see everyone outside of their world as kind of part of the conspiracy theory that they believe in, you know, that's kind of subjecting them. So it's really hard. I think the way the crucial thing, I think, when you're going into these communities, people that just don't trust you, is just you have to be completely and utterly upfront with them that we're journalists, and we've got a story to tell, and we are going to be challenging with you. We are going to, you know, we're going to ask you tough questions. We are not here to make a PR film. We're not here to, you know, elevate you, or we're here to try and kind of get to the truth. But on the flip side, we will give you a fair hearing. You know, we will, although we'll challenge you on camera and we'll have, you know, we'll ask you difficult questions, we will allow you to answer them. You know, we will, you know, faithfully represent your story. So I think that's the most important thing. It's from the get-go, just making them aware that that's the relationship. And then I think once you've kind of got that out of the way, it's almost like, I think it's a bit refreshing for them, because they're like, actually, yeah, I sort of get where I stand now. I mean, yeah, I'd say that is just the most important thing. And then obviously the hard thing, particularly with incels, is just the amount of time you have to spend finding them, frankly, and then agreeing, you know, getting them to meet up with you. That first hurdle of the first face-to-face contact is always a real kind of crunch moment. And in incels, I mean, I think we spoke to about 100 incels actually. We met up maybe with like 25, 30, and in the end with 3 of them all went on camera. So it gives you an idea of just all of that, you know, work that you have to do behind the scenes.
That's a lot of casting and sifting through talent. I don't want to end the session without asking you all about Jeopardy and when things have nearly gone wrong and how you've managed that. So Charlie, as you're here anyway, we'll start with you, then we'll come to Femi, Nicky, Cicelia, Debbie. Yes? Okay.
So I'd say that things go wrong all the time, actually. I'd say 95% of making a documentary is things going wrong. And it's then trying to salvage that. I'd say the example I've probably got of the thing that went the most wrong that I've ever worked on was I made an unreported world a few years back about the rise basically in private detectives in Indian society doing due diligence on future love marriages and love rivals. It was called India's Love Cheat Detectives, and we got access to this one particular firm of private eyes, basically led by this female private detective who essentially spied on people's future husbands and boyfriends and snooped back on and told the family all about them, what job they did, whether they had any other relationships. About a week into filming, we were in Delhi in India. There was only two of us, myself and the reporter. We began to realize that she had faked one of the scenes. So one of the contributors, who was essentially this former client basically of hers, when we were filming, we just got a sense that something wasn't quite right. Obviously, me and the reporter couldn't speak the language, but the fixer that we were with just began to notice things, and we actually captured off camera her kind of coaching this person, this actress, essentially, to sort of say certain things. And we looked this lady up. Turns out she was an actress. And at that point, we kind of just thought, oh God, we've been filming for a week. That's it. We can't trust this person. It's a complete disaster. We're not going to get a film. I was getting emails from the production company about the edit dates and things like that. I was just like, oh no. It's also my first ever unreported world. So I was obviously gutted, because I thought it's never going to make air. But we actually ended up making it part of the story. So we ended up kind of sort of twisting it and telling the story of this like deeply deceitful, dishonest person. And we confronted her when we found it. So we kind of filmed all that and made that part of the documentary. So we kind of, I guess, in that situation, you kind of make, water into wine or lemons into lemonade or whatever. You just do your best with what you've got, and you think laterally, and you think, okay, we can twist this, because it was actually amazing kind of drama and amazing. That moment when we flipped the camera back on her and confronted her was an amazing like moment, basically. So yeah, I would say that's an example, but basically just try and be as flexible as possible and realize that you can salvage things and be open with a channel as well about it.
Thank you. Wow, that sounds scary. I'm glad I wasn't in your shoes for that. Femi and Nicky, which one of you would like to go next? Jeopardy, something nearly going wrong, your heart's racing, you've promised something, you might not be able to deliver it.
I think one of the hardest things for us was making the show was like navigating through the pandemic. Was in the middle of it, and we was like just coming to terms with COVID and testing people and artists becoming sick on the day that you're meant to interview them. And just navigating through that whole process was like really a lot on the production. I think doing a show of that scale, it started off, I think it was meant to be 8 people per episode. And it just ended up becoming so many people, so many artists, because so many people had stories to tell, and we reached out to so many people. But I think keeping the production together in the middle of COVID was the most challenging part of making the show, because it was just the world turned upside down, and we was trying to navigate.
What about the music clearance?
Oh yeah, and the music clearance was like, I'll let Femi get onto that. That was just insane. It just took months and months and months of trying to clear hundreds of records, and a lot of artists no longer own their records, or they think they own their records and it's owned by somebody else, or the publishing is owned by somebody else. And that's something that had a lot of paperwork needed to be done, and Femi was navigating through that. We were trying to contact people. It was a very stressful process, but we got there in the end.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was the hardest element of it, is that, you can't tell the stories without showing the music, and then the music is owned by 1 million people. And I'll give you an example. We had a situation where basically the episode was supposed to go out, but it just couldn't go out because we hadn't cleared a song. But in order for it to go out the week after, we had to contact like Skepta's manager or something, but they were doing like a show in Ibiza for the whole week. And so these guys are in Ibiza, like some super club in Ibiza, and Nicky's harassing one person, I'm harassing the other person, this person is texting this person, and then randomly we got an email, I think the morning or the night before the show was supposed to go out, saying, oh, here it is. That was the email. Just a signature page saying, there you go. And it was just like, like at that last moment that came through. But we had so many, but a lot of the main difficulty with this was, number one, sort of figuring out how to incorporate so many contributors, because there were certain voices that you couldn't miss out. And like, there's still some people that are super offended that they're not in the documentary till today.
Always the way. Always the way.
Especially that we're telling a
so personally.
retrospective of lots of different music genres. And then you've got like on number two it was I suppose like then the music clearance element for me, like that really tested us, because we had to clear so much more music than we anticipated clearing.
The archive was very difficult as well. The archive was different channels on the archive, and people think they own their archive, but the person in the archive hasn't signed it off. So really, you don't own the archive. You've just filmed it, but you haven't had clearance, and there's just so many red tape that you need to get through that the channel want you to have.
The legal quagmire, I call it.
Yeah.
And some of the people are friends, and they're like sending us a text saying, "Oh yeah, you can have it," and we're like, "Whoa,
that's not how legal and release forms
not how it works."
I know. Okay, I'm aware there's a couple of minutes left, so I just want to ask Debbie quickly. In today's media world, you've got young audiences and digital impact, which are so important, as important as the mainstream on-air show. How do you prepare for your docs digital audience engagement?
Sorry, how do I prefer?
Yeah, so when you might start working with Charlie and the indie company, how do you prepare for the digital side? How are you going to market it to the audience that perhaps don't live at Channel 4 already?
That's all done. That's
the marketing team,
the commissioning stage. And there's a separate team at Channel 4 that does that. But certainly when I was in commissioning at the BBC, we would be thinking, and in my head, I have an idea of, okay, that bit will work for this, and we need to tell this in a slightly different way when we're telling it on TikTok to when we're telling it in a YouTube short. So there's help with that for the most part. When you're talking with the big broadcasters, you don't need to worry about
that bit. Okay,
making that film possible.
Well, I'm sure there will be a lot of other elements that impact the future of documentaries, from AI to so much more, but I want to get some final tips in. What would you all say for entry-level position people who are in this audience? Which opportunities exist when it comes to documentaries at your company? Cicelia, should we start with you?
Yeah, so Paramount UK, I would just keep an eye on their website, because they have just finished. They had an 18-month apprenticeship scheme running, so just waiting to see if that's going to happen again. And for updates on that, I would keep an eye on the website. For anyone who wants to work in production, though, I would target the production companies making the programs that you like and would like to work on, and come in to TV that way.
Wonderful. And then Charlie, I know that you've got an opinion on soft skills that you think young filmmakers should have. Share some of those so that they don't make any mistakes when they come into the world.
Yeah, I think one of them, in terms of soft skills, I think one of the most important, to be honest, is realizing that this is a huge team game. Like, making documentaries, you're working with people. It's not really about the individual. Every role is kind of like a cog in a machine. So I think the thing that I find that is, the best kind of soft skill character trait I come across are people that are just good with people, are willing to listen, are good at getting on with people, don't have an ego as well. It's a funny one, I think, because you're freelance, so you do also need to promote yourself. You need to promote, your ideas. You need to promote your profile because you need to get work. But don't let that impact on how you are working in a team. And, in terms of getting the story, trying to speak to contributors, it's not about you. It's about the bigger picture. It's about about the program and about working with people. So I'd say that's the most important thing. Put your ego to one side and, work with people, and just be friendly and kind and nice and willing to work hard, I think.
Nicky, what would be your suggested first steps for our audience to start in doc making?
I would say, first of all, make sure you got a passion for it. Make sure Rome wasn't built in a day. It's long hours, put yourself around like-minded people. Try and get as much work experience as possible. If it even starts from being a runner on set, just immerse yourself in that arena around those people. Because for me, I'm learning every day. You learn new skills every day. You never know enough, be open-minded. Try and shadow people. Just try and really be passionate about what you're doing, because it's a long journey. There's loads of people who want to do it. Everyone's special in their own unique way, but you have to go that extra mile and be prepared to put that extra hour in to be noticed. Me and Femi, the reason we're here is because we got up and we started doing things on our own accord. We didn't wait for the opportunity to come to us. We started trying to create the opportunity. And as people start hearing your name and the buzz starts getting around you, more opportunities come to you. And even when you do get big opportunities, you can't be content with that. The next day you wake up, we've got to be pitching to Cicelia the next day. We're sending her emails and we get no's. It doesn't mean because we won an RTS that it's an automatic yes. You have to be humble. It doesn't matter what award you win. If it's not the right project, it's not the right project. And nothing's personal. It's nothing's personal in this game. So try and be tough skin.
Very important advice. Yeah, nothing is personal. I think when I was much younger, starting out in TV, I take everything personally. Why didn't they like my idea? It's not fair, etc. Okay, let's turn the tables. For you five, you've got 10 seconds each to pitch whatever you would like to pitch. What should people be looking out for from you next that you would like them to watch, or even go back and watch that you've already got online? Because this is our online audience right here. Charlie.
God, that you put me on the spot.
Right. So would Debbie first? Are you happy to go?
Yeah. I would say watch the Untold that's out today. It's called Conan Trapped in Trauma. It's one of the most incredible films that we've commissioned. And Conan allowed us into a very sacred space to witness him going through therapy for PTSD, and it's just filmed beautifully as well. But it was a very tricky film to make, but it's one of the ones I'm most proud of.
I watched it this morning. It's incredible. Well done, Debbie. I watched it this morning.
Thank you,
Is it Conan from Crepton, Conan?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Even right. If you don't know him, still watch it, because it is about trauma and young people not getting help with their mental health.
Amazing. Thank you. Femi?
You're mute, Fem.
Yeah, watch the evolution of Black British music.
It's so good. It's on my 5. It's so easy to watch. I mean, it's gripping all the way through. I rewound bits. Nikki?
I would say I'll back that evolution. You have to watch that. That's important. It's 35 years documenting the Black British music history.
I did tweet about all of these shows over the weekend, but I'm going to do another thread after this. Cicelia, anything from you that's not evolution?
Okay, I was going to say evolution, but we have got a series dropping on the 12th of July, BET UK, and you can watch it on my 5. It's called Me and My Mum. 3 1 hours following 3 Black British celebrities and their mothers, exploring those relationships and the impact that their mothers have had on their lives and their journey to success. It's really beautiful, heartwarming, insightful programming.
That sounds wonderful. Charlie, go.
I think I'd probably say The Secret World of Incels, actually, just because I think it was, although it's a very extreme documentary, there's a lot of kind of crossover into some of the things that are happening in the wider like manosphere, and the wider kind of concern around young men being completely disaffected and kind of not being able to find a place in their world. So although these characters are very extreme and had really extreme views, actually like what the film was talking about more generally, I think is quite interesting and important. It's just a really like scary really scary kind of subculture, and in some ways sort of scary time to be a young man, I think, trying to find their way in the world.
Thank you so much. And if you'd like to stay in touch with us, we're all on social media. My Twitter and Insta handles are at Jasmine Dotiwala. And I'm sure that everybody else is easy to find. If you're going to make it in the doc world, you have to be a good researcher, and it's not difficult to find people's names and find their social platforms. So stay in touch with us. With all those thoughts out there, it's been a really enjoyable conversation. It's gone 2 p.m, so I've massively overrun by 5 minutes. I hope the panel has enthused you all to create documentaries. It's time for us to close. My utmost thanks to Cicelia, Debbie, Nicky, Femi and Charlie. We really appreciate all your time, so thank you so much. And thank you to you, our audience here today, our future filmmakers, our TV industry folks. Also remember to keep checking out the RTS Futures website. There are so many different sessions on there. There are sessions you can go back and watch that you may have missed throughout the years. They are all incredible, from the first 5 years in television to many, many more. Thank you to Jemima at the RTS for facilitating the session. Until next time, have a great rest of your day. Have a great time working in documentaries. Take care, everyone.